All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Going to be doing the deep dive here for all the top prop bets for week 5. Let's go and get into it. And so we'll go ahead and start out with the London game, which is going to be the New York Jets versus the Minnesota Vikings. And so when we take a peek at this game, it is a little bit higher scoring than I would have thought, given how the Packers offense looked last week. Minnesota Vikings offense has looked good, last week as well. So definitely interesting game total that might have to do with the travel, with the field, but it is higher than I probably would have thought. At the same time, maybe not. This Jets offense is probably better than it showed last week. The matchup against Denver, I think, was partially due to why they struggled. A little bit of chemistry issues going on with Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson. I think that is going to feel the Devontae Adams trades even more, especially, either way, if the Jets win or lose this game, that's going to inspire the trade talks either way. But then you got the Vikings. The Vikings are going to be 2.5-point favorites. Looked good in the first half last week. That was a lot due actually to the Packers just beating themselves and the Vikings being good enough to be able to score on those plays and those possessions. But then we also saw kind of, I would say, Kevin O'Connell's bad side of his coaching where you let teams come back. Now that was more so, I think, due to the Packers just being more talented per se, like they are. But the Vikings are a great team as well. We're not taking anything away. They won the game and they did what they had to do to win as well. They are playing good, winning football. I just think that the second half could have been a little bit of, okay, that's how you beat the Vikings. And the Jets, for the most part, are not going to be a team that are going to make, I say that, but a team that's not going to make stupid penalties and going to make stupid mistakes. Rodgers won't. His offensive line might, if you guys heard those quotes. Now, looking at the injury report for both teams, good to go. The Jets are good to go, and the Vikings are good to go. They actually might get TJ Hawkinson back a little bit earlier than I thought, which obviously is going to be huge. That's really the difference maker for the Vikings. TJ Hawkinson is arguably the best tight end in the league, and if they get him back, that could be huge. But we take a peek at the prop bets that we're getting here for this game, and we are getting some pretty good edges, especially with the fantasy score lines. Alan Lazard to get over 7.5 for a fantasy score is one of the better bets that we have. Tyler Conklin to get over 6 for a fantasy score, to me, is the best bet that we have, especially both of those compared to the average sportsbook line. Do like the over there. Garrett Wilson over 12 for a fantasy score. I don't know if I need to get there. I don't exactly like that one too much. Mike Williams to get over 7 for a fantasy score, I don't mind, but I also really like Mike Williams to just get over 2.5 receptions. I think he has a good chance to do that. And on top of that, guys like Aaron Rodgers, looking at the projection data does like him to get over his passing yards. That being said, I don't know. This is an overseas game. I could see Rodgers just not having a good game. He's a guy that likes things his own way, and maybe that could be enough to throw him off. But let's just talk about all these prop bets that are popping up and really why they're popping up and why I think they're good bets. First and foremost, Tyler Conklin, guys, he's playing 90% of the snaps. Had a good game in week 3. Probably should have had a good game in week 4. Took a while for him to get some targets and kind of get going. Had 5.7 DK points last week. Targets were there. Ended up with more targets last week than he did in week 3 when he had that big game. 4 receptions, only 17 receiving yards. Do expect that to be a little bit higher, especially given this matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. Not all that good against opposing tight ends. So I think that's a spot where the Jets can choose to attack the Vikings, and that's a bet that I like. Now we look at Alan Lazard. Alan Lazard has been more productive, I think maybe just as productive as Garrett Wilson. Whatever, the gap is extremely close. And so those lines that we're getting where there's a big prop line difference between their fantasy scores, that probably is a little bit too high. Why is Alan Lazard being involved this much? He has Aaron Rodgers' trust. That's as simple as it is. As a Packers fan, one of the more frustrating things was that Rodgers just would not get the ball to rookies or younger players because he just simply didn't trust them to do the right things. And actually, if you watch the Packers game last week, you kind of saw both sides of that. Wicks is a great receiver, I think, but one of Jordan Love's INTs were simply because Wicks didn't get his shoulder around, flip his head. That's a play that Aaron Rodgers, I'm like, nope, you're out of the game for the rest of the game, or I'm not giving you targets. You cost us an INT and probably a touchdown. So Alan Lazard simply has Rodgers' trust, and that's why he's playing. Last year, guys, Lazard barely played. It's as simple as that. He has his trust, so he's going to play a lot. And so if he continues to play 85% of the snaps, yeah, I think he has a good chance to get that over. Especially while Garrett Wilson is still demanding a lot of attention. And then Breece Hall as well. Breece Hall is demanding a lot of defensive attention. Thus, you're not going to spend a lot of effort guarding Allen Lazard or Tyler Conklin for that matter. And that's why they're getting targeted a decent amount. Aaron Rodgers knows that he can find the weak spot in a defense and exploit it. Now, Mike Williams is certainly an interesting one. Only 58% of the snaps last week, which, if this game is going to be decently high scoring, I would imagine that would lead to a little bit more Mike Williams snaps. Like, even if we get 65% of the snaps, that's huge to me. And then I think he would be able to get his overs as well. But regardless, I really like all the prop bets that we are getting here. Now, while we're here looking at the snaps, I do think it's worth pointing out Breece Hall still saw his same amount of snaps. I don't think you should be all too worried about Breece Hall at this point. My worry with Breece Hall at the start of the season was that Braylon Allen was a great running back and really just underdrafted. We have seen that come to fruition, but Braylon Allen still only getting about 30% of the snaps. And I just don't see that changing. But there's not a bet that I would want to bet on those two specifically. So with that, all these bets that are popping up as good bets for PrizePicks, I'm good to go with. I like those a lot. And then we look at Underdog. Underdog's like a little bit slower getting their lines out right now. Really, the only one that I like here would be Mike Williams to get over 2.5 receptions. That would literally be it because the board is pretty limited here for those bets that we were getting for them. And then real quickly, let's just take a look at like the average lines that we are getting. In terms of like getting a projected edge, we do have Aaron Rodgers. All of his passing yards props are going to be ones that are projected to be good edges for us because the projection data does like the over a little bit more. So really across the board, we're going to get good edges for this. The best one would be Rodgers to get over 224.5 passing yards on BetMGM. They're valued as a 50-50 split. The average line would have it slightly higher as about a 50-50 split as well. So already a slightly decent edge. You could pair that up with Garrett Wilson as well. So not a bad bet there. And then while we're there, we'll stick here with the Minnesota Vikings as well. Jalen Nailor under his receiving yards is one that's kind of popping up. I don't know if I agree with that. I think Jalen Nailor is a good talent. But let's just talk about the Minnesota Vikings now. So Naylor did see a pretty significant drop in his snaps. And so really just any bet that's regarding Naylor, let's just not bet. He is someone that has looked good, but really with Jordan Addison being back, playing 66% of the snaps, he was the second best weapon there. But also, they're playing with the lead for most of the game. So they weren't running out a lot of three receiver sets. And so to me, I think Naylor, betting on him to get about 50% of the snaps again and kind of proving that he deserves it, I don't mind that to bet him over that receiving yards total, but at the same time, probably feels like we're forcing it. But looking at the snaps from last week, I don't think it's going to be all that clear as to what we can expect. What I was surprised by is Mund and Josh Oliver really splitting the work. But again, I think that's due to Oliver probably being a little bit of a better blocker than Mund. To me, what was most surprising about last week was the amount of snaps that Aaron Jones got. It somewhat in a way seemed like this was on purpose because he was playing in Lambeau again, against his former team, that they were intentional about getting him more snaps. That's the only way I can really explain it because Ty Chandler has looked pretty solid this season. And so that was a little bit strange. So now we jump into some PrizePicks prop bets that we have here for the Minnesota Vikings. Definitely a tighter board for sure. And really the way I kind of look at it is, like with someone like Johnny Munn, he is more of a pass catcher for them. And so if you think the Jets are going to win this game, which maybe you do, maybe that's your upset pick, then you would want to bet Munn to get over his fantasy score. That's not terrible. That's like 2 catches. He is a good pass catcher. Like, I don't hate that, but not one that we need to go out of our way to target. One of my favorite actual like sportsbook bets was like Sam Darnold to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns because you can get at like plus 105. And again, if that line is the way that that game total is what's suggesting that, I would see him getting that over. But yeah, there's really not that many great bets here for PrizePicks. Let's jump in Underdog. And so for Underdog, I mean, this was kind of popping up here on PrizePicks as well. Aaron Jones for under his rush attempts. I do probably think that they will give Ty Chandler a little bit more work in this game, especially after giving Aaron Jones such a healthy workload last week. They're going to want him to last, and that's the way that you make him last. You limit his snaps. Another one that I don't mind would be Justin Jefferson to get over 6 receptions. Obviously, the average sportsbook line is really liking him to get over 5.5 receptions, giving him a 54% chance for that to hit. But at the same time, if this game is higher scoring, and I keep saying that, like, the Jets offense was just so bad last week that 40 points seems like a lot. Okay. So it's like, I know it's not a high scoring game, but it does seem like a high scoring game to me, if that makes sense. But if it's a more pass heavy script, then I don't mind Justin Jefferson over 6 receptions. Now, you do expect Sauce to give him some defensive attention, and maybe you could go with Jordan Addison to get over 3 receptions. I think this one has a good chance to be a push. And honestly, I might use this with those other bets that we were getting. Now, I do want to call out on PrizePicks, that is. Now, I do want to call out that Ty Chandler over his rush yards on PrizePicks is maybe one that we could use as well. That's off by 3 or so compared to the average sportsbook line. So now we're going to get into more of the main slate games for Sunday. We're going to start off with the Carolina Panthers versus the Chicago Bears. Another Andy Dalton revenge game. That's kind of a theme this year because he's played on so many teams. Kind of a fun narrative there. This is another game that's not going to be that high in terms of the projected game total. Only 41 points in this game is going to be scored at projection-wise. That's because the Panthers defense has looked better recently, and the Chicago Bears defense has been pretty solid, a little bit leaky at times, but for the most part, very good. Also, Andy Dalton does feel like he's kind of been outkicking his coverage a little bit with his play, but he has looked good. Don't get me wrong. I actually thought Xavier Legette, who people are going to be hyped about, I don't know. I didn't think he looked like as good as the stats said. He didn't look bad. Don't get me wrong, but it seemed a little, I don't want to say fluky, but I want to see it a few more times before I believe that he's like a true, really good talent. Deontay Johnson, on the other hand, looked great last week. He really did. For the Chicago Bears, they finally got DeAndre Swift somewhat going. That's kind of him as a player. He's a big boomer bust type of player. We'll see if he gets going. Caleb Williams continues to struggle, continues to not look all that good, although we'll make a few plays here or there. That kind of gives you a lot of hope, really. So it'll be interesting to see what type of Caleb Williams we get as well. We did see Keenan Allen come back, and so he should be good to go in this game. We're not too worried about that. Cole Kmet did pop up in the injury report. We're expecting him to play. If he were to sit, though, Gerald Everett would be someone that would see an uptick in both playing time and targets. Now, I do think looking at the snaps for both teams is somewhat intriguing, so let's jump into that. Specifically with the receivers, we saw Keenan Allen play 68% of the snaps again in week 4, which is what he played in week 1. DeAndre Carter just not getting any snaps then. Roma Dunze did see his drop from about 90%, which was awesome, to 78%, which was kind of expected based off the week 1 usage. Keenan Allen did not get as much work as I would have thought in that game. Again, Caleb Williams still somewhat struggling. DJ Moore getting treated kind of like a workhorse running back, if you will, in terms of playing time and in terms of like targets for the most part. And what I mean by that is like DJ Moore is going to be the one that makes this offense go. We look at the snaps then for the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, Legette was kind of treated as Adam Thielen 2.0. Again, did not look as good as Adam Thielen. Don't get me wrong. He didn't look bad. The plays that were there to be made, Legette made, which was good for him. Mingo did play basically all of his snaps in the slot. He was the slot receiver, played 80% of the snaps as well. Deontay Johnson did look great. My prediction at the start of the year was actually that Deontay Johnson would be this year's DJ Moore from last year. Obviously, DJ Moore went to a new team, really kind of exploded last year with the Chicago Bears. We have now seen Deontay Johnson for 2 straight games really go off. Another kind of fascinating thing here in terms of the snaps is that Tommy Tremble played 87% of the snaps. He was someone that I liked for DFS purposes last week on DraftKings or lineup contests. And that was because of his snaps they got the previous week. I'm like, all right, we can get 2 receptions out of him. That's great. Had you told me that Sanders actually got like 80% of the work, I would have believed you, because Sanders was involved early on in that game, and I did not see Tremble at all watching that. So it was strange. And in terms of the running backs, we actually saw Chuba Hubbard get a little bit more work than Miles Sanders. I would say this game, Chuba Hubbard looked pretty darn good, like better than he has previously. I thought like there's a clear separation, I would say, in the talent between him and Sanders. Now, Sanders didn't look bad as well. Sanders has been solid. They're both good. I would say Sanders is a good backup running back to have, like he's being used. And Chuba Hubbard, he is kind of like a borderline starting running back in the league now with how he's been playing. It was nice to see that improvement. And guys, unfortunately for this game, right now, we're not getting that many prop bets for this game. It's just Andy Dalton pretty much in 1 prop bet for Chuba Hubbard. The reason why Andy Dalton's passing line is so low is because it is a difficult matchup going against the Chicago Bears defense. Second most difficult matchup in terms of like fantasy points given up to opposing quarterbacks. So that's why we're seeing his lines be pretty low and his projection data be pretty low as well. This would tell us that we probably do want to bet his under passing yards, but for the most part, given how Deontay Johnson has looked, I don't really want to touch touch that bet. I think that's one we can avoid. And then jumping into the Chicago Bears, I actually like, I wouldn't mind this under for DeAndre Swift, mostly because like he's so hit or miss. At the same time, that would just tell us probably to avoid it, especially given the fact that the average sportsbook line is kind of telling us to do the opposite of that. Keenan Allen receiving yards, this is off by 3 compared to PrizePicks and Underdog, guys. So this is one where if you're watching this video at this around the same time as the timestamp in that lower corner of the video, left-hand corner of the video, like this is a potential minimally opportunity. 3 yards might not seem like much, but this could be the difference between a really good day or not a bad day, is if he hits the middle. And the average sportsbook line would have this at about 41.5. So we can bet the over on PrizePicks, bet the under on Underdog. Now, the potential issue with this bet is that, again, Caleb Williams has struggled. Keenan Allen did get a lot of work in week 1. A lot of it was shorter routes. And we saw that happen again in week 4, where basically all of his targets were like shorter targets. So I don't know, he would have to really have a different game for him to be able to get over this receiving yards total, but also it'd have to be Caleb Williams just look better. So I would rather, I think, want to bet the under on Underdog than the over on PrizePicks. And then we look at this game based off of how Underdog sees it going. And again, basically not a huge edge here. We are getting a few more prop bets, it seems like, on Underdog. But for the most part, I don't see a big edge here. So let's go ahead and jump on into the next game. So in this next game, we got the Baltimore Ravens versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of a fun game because you got the Bengals still kind of in a must-win situation. They were able to get their first win last week, but they still need to get a win this week. Chase Brown is someone that's coming in off of a very good game last week, but how much playing time is he going to get? Zach Moss didn't look bad as well, but it was clear Chase Brown finally looked like the better running back last week. And then Derrick Henry, obviously coming in off of that massive game last week, they're able to get him going early. Thus, it was a Derrick Henry game because they had the lead early in that game. It's still true that if Justice Hill gets a lot of work, it's going to be because the Baltimore Ravens are playing from behind. But obviously, a game script where the Ravens are playing with the lead is going to benefit Derrick Henry. You can stack accordingly that way as well. Looking at the game totals, guys, this is going to be one of the highest scoring games in the slate. So we probably do want to be favoring some more over bets here rather than under bets. It is a 49 for a game total, 2.5 point spread in favor of the Ravens winning. And one thing that I think is kind of just fun to note is like you can directly see a lot of Derrick Henry's success has come from Patrick Ricard getting a lot of work at the fullback position, kind of being a lead blocker for him. So kind of an interesting thing that has developed, and it's kind of been fun to watch. But again, we know what to expect. Like if you think the Bengals are going to win this game, you probably want to favor more of Justice Hill over receiving type props. If you think the Baltimore Ravens are going to win, you want to favor more of Derrick Henry rushing props. It's pretty simple. In terms of tight end snaps, Mark Andrews obviously had a terrible drop in that game. I don't know if you guys remember that. It should have been like a 20-yard play for him. That's basically all we saw of Mark Andrews. He made a couple of nice blocks. Don't get me wrong. Like he's still going to be used for that production because he is still a decent blocker, but Isaiah Likely is the one that still was involved in the passing game a little bit more. The passing game has really not been there the last 2 games for the most part. Bateman scores a touchdown. Aguilar could have scored a touchdown. I believe Lamar Jackson missed him on a kind of a play that he could have hit him on. That would have been a big gain. But it's a guessing game between those two, Bateman and Aguilar. And in a game where Derrick Henry is going to be featured as much as he would, yeah, we're not going to see it as much of Zay Flowers. I do think Zay Flowers could be a good trade for type target in your fantasy football season long leagues because I don't see his value ever getting lower than this, obviously, unless he gets an injury, but we don't really count that. Now, for the Bengals, the workload split was certainly interesting last week. So Zach Moss having gained, 65 to 76% of the snap or 80% of the snaps with an average of about 70. That's still was somewhat true last week where he had 60% of the snaps, but Chase Brown ended up with 40% of the snaps. Chase Brown did look better, guys. There's some between the tackle runs that Chase Brown has really struggled with throughout his career that he was able to make in this game that really popped to me. And if that continues, he will be the top running back in this offense sooner rather than later. I think that's inevitable regardless, but Zach Moss is one of those players that continuously does the correct things right, so it's tough to not have him on the field. Another interesting thing is that it does seem like Eric All is eventually going to be the tight end in this offense. A lot of people were thinking it'd be Mike Gesicki. I kind of thought at the start of the season, or in the offseason, it might actually be Tanner Hudson being the top receiving tight end. Obviously, that was a bold take that didn't work out. But it seems like Eric Hall is someone that they like now. They liked him in the preseason. That's more of a, if we have any prop bets that are popping up for him, I could see potentially targeting the over for him because I do think he's going to be more and more involved as the season goes on. 60% of the snaps last week, they are kind of shuffling those guys in and out. So there's nothing too much to take away from that, but I did think it was noteworthy. And then just the big thing for me, guys, is T. Higgins has looked good. Like last year, I did not think he looked all that good. Maybe a little bit disinterested. I don't know. It's just so weird how he looked last year. And this year looks much better. 10 targets last week. Snaps have not been an issue. 6 targets the week before that. Looked good that week as well. So he's playing a lot. Andre Yoshivas is basically playing in the Tyler Boyd role as well. Only 1 target last week. We did see that with Tyler Boyd. There were some games with Chase and Higgins on the field where he was heavily involved, and most of the games was about 2 to 3 targets. So I think that's going to be the role that we'll see from Yoshi Vash a little bit more. And then because the Bengals were up by so much, because the running backs had like 30 carries, we didn't see that much out of the passing game. It was concentrated on T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but given this game is a higher scoring game and it's actually a pretty easy matchup for the Bengals receivers, I do expect them to be more involved. And it is a more difficult matchup for the Bengals running backs. And so, guys, I really wouldn't mind Joe Burrow to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns in this game. Again, given the fact that it is a high-scoring game and given the fact that this is a matchup in which it promotes more of a pass-heavy script, I don't mind that. Zach Moss get over 2.5 receptions isn't a terrible one as well to me on paper. Moss is someone here that is averaging about 3 receptions per game. Vegas line does have it at 2.5. The DST receptions given up to opposing running backs is 2.2. And so he's really only projected at 1.87. So the projection day is not going to like that one as much. But given the fact that I expect them not to be able to get their, between the tackles run game going, I could see this being an option that the Bengals try to use to get the running backs going. At the same time, probably just don't need to make it. Really, the best bet that I see here is going to be Joe Burrow for over 1.5 passing touchdowns. And I just want to see if we have any kind of outliers from the books. Not really. So there's not an edge there to gain on those books, but that really just tells me that honestly, once the public money gets in here a little bit more, I bet this one does jump up to about a 54% likelihood to hit. And again, given the game total, I think it just makes sense. Now, you could do his over INTs if you want, but that's not one that I want to do. He's only thrown one INT this season, and he's thrown for 2 passing touchdowns in 3 straight games. The only game he didn't was the game against New England. New England's a pretty decent defense, and they just look terrible. They got off to a slow start. From there, are there any other prop bets that are standing out? Again, I kind of said I would want to favor some more of the overs, and honestly, probably T. Higgins over receiving yards potentially on one of the sports books, because right now in PrizePicks or Underdog, it's not seeming like we have a big edge there. And actually, guys, what's interesting here is if we sort it by projected edge, we're actually getting some plus edges here for his receiving yards, which is kind of awesome. And so I know ESPN Bet has this line at -135 but it's for him to get over 49.5. And so even at -135, I don't think that's a terrible bet. I think I'd be fine making that. Again, he's looked good. I've been surprised by that. Maybe he could potentially go over his receptions. I would actually argue this is a better bet. Let's look at some of the reception lines. -115 is the best that we can get for T. Higgins here on DraftKings to get over 4.5 receptions. And so to me, this is an outlier in the market, gets a good matchup. The role's been there for him. I can get on board with this. And now for Baltimore, I don't mind the idea of doing T. Higgins for over his 4.5 receptions. If it was 2.5, we would love that. But I think this is a good PrizePicks bet. Again, if it's going to be a more high scoring game, more of a pass heavy script as it could potentially be. And honestly, it's kind of just given the fact that the Ravens have been able to really rush the football in 2 straight games, probably will make the Bengals put a little bit more defensive attention on scheming up something to stop that. Thus, I think they'll just open up a little bit more in the passing game. So Zay Flowers over 4.5 receptions, I think, is a very nice little PrizePicks bet that we can make. And from there, that kind of seems it. Again, I kind of mentioned that you can game script Henry and Justice Hill. Don't hate the idea of doing that. Rashad Bateman's line is off by 2 almost compared to the average sportsbook line. So worth calling that one out as well. We'll jump into Underdog now. And so for Underdog, we are just kind of seeing more of the same here. I do like the overpassing touchdowns. I think that's the one I'm going to be rolling with the most. We are getting Zach Moss on both sides for over 2.5 receptions. Don't hate that. Don't love that. But not much there for Underdog. So let's go ahead and jump on into the next game. In the next game, we have one of those higher scoring games as well. The other high scoring game on the slate, the Buffalo Bills versus the Houston Texans. Now, for the Texans, in terms of like an injury report update, Tank Dell is expected to be back in this game, limited in practice. The one kind of concern is that Joe Mixon not back practicing on Wednesday. We'll see if he practices on Thursday. Don't have that report just yet. Indications would be that he's going to play in this game, but we have to see. Like, that is certainly big because with him out and with Pierce being out, we'll have to see kind of what his update is. It's actually been Dario Gumbawale who's kind of been the lead back for them, especially in the passing game. That's not surprising. He's been involved in the passing game, but a lot of people were thinking to be Cam Akers, which is also true. Like, Cam Akers has gotten a heavy workload on the ground, but both of them, let's be honest, are just kind of meh, but it is a good matchup. So in a game that's going to be higher scoring, I'll show you guys the game preview here. 47.5 points, 1 point spread in favor of the Bills. Like, we probably do want to be maybe attacking more of a pass heavy script, right? If it's going to be a little bit more of a shootout, it might promote more of a Dario Gumbawale game, but at the same time, we just need that running back injury update. Now, I do think it's worth spending a little bit of time here on the snap counts. So, guys, Keon Coleman is someone I would be trying to trade for in my season-long leagues if I can, if possible. He does look good. Like, you can see the talents there. It does seem like it's more of just a matter of time before he breaks out, not an if. They have been trying to get Khalil Shakir going in some short yard situations. That role is not going to go away. Matt Collins getting a decent amount of work, but I do think the true receiver number one and probably their top pass catcher as the season progresses will become Keon Coleman, and this would actually be a good spot for him to potentially break out. Assuming he doesn't do anything during the week that limits his snaps like he did in week 3, should be all systems go here for Keon Coleman. Tight end wise, we did see a little bit more of a split in terms of the tight end snaps between Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. And then James Cook still seeing his normal workload. Actually saw a little bit more last week, but no big difference there. And yeah, just worth pointing out for that split, it was a split 40% Dario Gumbawale, 40% Cam Akers for the Houston Texans. And then it was Robert Woods getting 72% of the snaps last week in place of Tank Dell, which was what I was expecting. If Tank Dell were to sit, we'd probably be looking at that again. Now, I do think it's worth pointing out that this is a difficult matchup here for the two Houston receivers that we're probably looking at, Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. If Tank Dell is out, I do expect Diggs to still be involved in the offense. 9 targets last week, 12 the week before that. I could see that number dipping a little bit if Tank Dell is active, but if Tank Dell is active, I kind of expect him to get not work out of the backfield, but kind of more work replacing some of those kind of backfield first down touches, if that makes sense. Because yes, the Bills have been good at stopping pass, very terrible at stopping the run. And so with that, I think you just try to get a little bit more unique. Tank Dell has been used that way already a decent amount this season. So I would expect that to be some sort of manufactured production that goes to Tank Dell. And so let's go ahead and jump into the prop bets that we are getting for this game. We're going to start out with PrizePicks here. Nothing too crazy here, but again, just given the fact that this game is projected to be a shootout, I don't mind the idea of going CJ Stroud for over 1.5 passing touchdowns. At the same time, I kind of get why that line is being presented the way that it is because the Bills have been good stopping the pass. Now, to me, it is shocking that the Bills have been that good at stopping the pass because they were a little bit banged up to start the season. That was not expected to be their strength, and it kind of has been. So a little bit strange there, I would say. I don't mind the idea of like CJ Stroud passing completions because I just see a lot more short yardage passes in this game for him. But I don't know. I don't mind the idea of like maybe a sportsbook bet of just doing Josh Allen over 1.5 passing touchdowns and then CJ Stroud over 1.5 passing touchdowns because, again, this could be a game that is higher scoring. Again, just a line that is worth pointing out to you guys is the CJ Stroud passing yards line here, 263.5 compared to the average sportsbook line. This is off by 5. So again, I'm putting the timestamp down in the lower left-hand corner because, again, it could be updated, and don't be surprised if it is. I expect that to be much more concentrated. Another kind of edge that we have here compared to the average sportsbook line is Josh Allen pass and rush yards. Again, seemingly off by 7. Josh Allen pass yards as well, off by 5. So honestly, probably let's take a peek at Vegas here. What are they giving us here? And I was thinking we'd probably be getting some bigger edges than this. We are not. in terms of like the projection data versus the average line. But maybe there's some slight edges we can do here. I do think that honestly the under pass yards for CJ Stroud is a bet that is someone popping up there for us to use on prize picks then, just given the lines that we're getting. So it is off by a decent amount, off by 5 on prize picks right now. That could be the difference between cashing or not cashing. Don't hate that. Don't hate that. Then we'll take a quick peek here at Underdog. I think it's going to be more of the same here, guys. I was kind of wondering if we were going to get some receptions props, and I would probably agree. This would be a game in which we probably want to favor a little bit more the under for Nico Collins. 6.5 receptions. I would say the line at 6 is correct. And yeah, because we're not getting any big ones, big edges on Underdog, let's take a peek at some receptions props. And we're really only getting Diggs and Nico Collins right now, which is a little bit annoying. Diggs at 5.5 receptions. I could actually see the under hitting here, and it's favorited. But this really depends on Tank Dell. If Tank Dell's out, I think we'd want to hammer the over 5.5 receptions. But I probably agree with Vegas here. This is a game where I think Vegas just has it mostly right. And so maybe take advantage of some of those prop line differences. And so, guys, we're about a third of the way done with this video. Do appreciate you guys all being here. If you could just leave a like, and if you guys have never subscribed to the channel, that does help out a lot. Leave a comment on any prop bets that you guys have liked thus far. If you guys have a disagreement with any of them, feel free to let me know in the comment section below as well. Those comments do help out the channel. I'm going to take a quick break, so you guys will see that timestamp in the bottom left jump. You guys won't really notice the difference, hopefully. All right, so we go ahead and jump on into the next game. We got the Miami Dolphins versus the New England Patriots. And looking at this game total, it is a 1-point spread. The game total is very low scoring, though, 36.5. And we know why that is. Backup quarterback Tyler Huntley is going to be at the helm for the Miami Dolphins. That we saw what that looked like. It wasn't that pretty. Now, that being said, it was a big miss. It was a 1-yard miss, maybe 3-yard miss. Throw away from having an okay day, I guess, with Tyreek Hill scoring a long touchdown, what would have been a 60-yard touchdown. Like, sure, that's slightly a part of the equation. You would expect an NFL quarterback to at least hit that 50% of the time. So my argument is that if he gets that chance again, which he might, you would hope he would be able to hit it. But yeah, this is a very low scoring game. We're probably not going to be targeting that many players in this game. Now, the biggest takeaway in this game is really looking at Malik Washington. Will he be active? That's obviously just a fun thing to mention. He's a fun player. I would like to see how he develops. Odell Beckham is practicing for whatever that's worth. Cool, whatever. Don't really care. It's not going to help the offense out that much. Might even hurt it. But like the biggest piece of news is Mostert going to be back, because he is someone that does help out this offense a decent amount, because he is in between the tackles runner. I said this a bunch. People probably thought I was stupid when HN was going off. But you need to have someone like Mostert in there to kind of make that offense work, so that you can use HN in kind of those unique ways, those outside rushes, split HN out, get those pass attempts to him. You need a good between the tackles rusher like that. And with Jeff Wilson being injured and, frankly, not all that good these days, you need to have Mostert healthy to also help out this offense. So I could see us potentially looking at that Miami Dolphins offense looking better this week. I just don't really want to bet on that. I think what we're going to be seeing here is that the Patriots are probably going to be the team that we want to be targeting, because the Patriots at least get a good matchup via the run game. And one of the annoying things is that they keep doing this weird stuff with their receivers where they're just kind of, I don't know, maybe trying to figure it out, I guess. You would think that they would. So Jalen Polk went from playing 50% of the snaps or so to 80% last week. Okay. Yeah. Demario Douglas go from 80% to 59%. KJ Osborne saw his snaps dip a little bit, as you would expect. Tyquan Thornton continues to see his snaps decrease. It was Polk getting more snaps over Thornton. That was a big thing for him. But it's just kind of annoying that has been continuing. Looking at the tight end snaps as well, Hunter Henry got a lot more work in this game rather than Austin Hooper. I do think that is noteworthy. Hooper had been eating into Hunter Henry a little bit. And then running back wise, kind of a crazy running back split right now. Stevenson, 55% last week, averaging about 64, and Antonio Gibson averaging about 30. Now, I mentioned that this is going to be a good matchup. Running backs against Miami, that's the thing we want to be targeting. So I do expect Stevenson to kind of get going in this game. And assuming that this game stays close, it is going to be Stevenson being the running back that we would want to target. I could actually see him get about 60% to 65% of the snaps if that does happen. And I do expect that to happen. Do I expect the Patriots to win? I don't know if I necessarily believe that for sure as a fact, but it should stay close. And if it stays close, Stevenson should be someone that we're looking at. And now, what's annoying is that we're not getting any prop bets just yet for the Patriots on Prize Picks. That is, hopefully that changes pretty quickly here. So we'll jump into just that game slate and total top prop bets that we are getting. We're mostly just getting rush and receiving touchdown props as well. So, guys, for now, it's kind of just a stay away. But I will say, Demario Douglas or Jalen Polk, if we get the receptions at like 2.5, I would say yes, let's bet the over there. They're probably going to be at 3.5. If that's a plus bet on one of the sports books, I would be okay betting that over for their receptions. And then for what it's worth, I do want to call it, this is a pretty good matchup for the Miami Dolphins receivers as well. I mentioned Hill was literally a good throw away from having a pretty good game, having a touchdown, having like 50 plus yards, and no one would really be making a big deal out of kind of the lack of production that Tyreek Hill has had. Now, you might argue Tua probably doesn't even make that throw anyways. That'd be probably a fair argument, but the offense would be better. We know that. But this is going to be a good matchup. Tennessee has been decent. One more week with Tyler Huntley at the helm, being a little bit more established in the offense. I would expect Tyreek Hill to be able to get over 4.5 receptions. I believe that was what his line was at last night or in that game against Tennessee. So if that does happen again, I would be fine betting his over there. But let's jump on into this next game. We got Washington versus Cleveland. And the first thing I want to point out about this game, guys, is that Deshaun Watson has been playing better than I think people really realize. It's probably because they haven't had a primetime game just yet. That game that the Giants played with Daniel Jones, I mentioned Daniel Jones had been playing better than people thought. And I think everyone kind of saw that in that game. That's been the same situation with Deshaun Watson. Week one, those INTs really weren't his fault. Jacksonville did fine. Giants, kind of did his part, I would say. Then last week, Cooper drops. Cooper's been honestly worse than Deshaun Watson has been the issue. If Amari Cooper is playing well, the optics on Deshaun Watson would be better. Now, I don't want to say he's been playing great, but look at some of the terrible quarterback play that's going around in the NFL. Watson would not fall under that category. And so you give him a good matchup against Washington, I think that could be something that we could target, and we could potentially target that with someone like Amari Cooper in a staff because, well, Cooper is coming in off of a bad game. And prior to that, he was coming in off of a pretty good game. That's kind of the story of Amari Cooper. This should be a balancing out type of game for him. So I don't mind the idea of like stacking Cooper and Deshaun Watson together to both have good games. Now we get into the game total, and this is a pretty high scoring game. It's also a close game. Washington's only favored to win by 3 points, which I think some people would be surprised by. But again, you kind of watch it. Cleveland should be doing better than they have been. So I kind of get that. So we jump into some of the prop bets that we were getting for Cleveland on Prize Picks. Don't exactly love these, okay? But we are seeing a clear difference between the projection data, the Prize Picks line, the underdog line. And so right away, probably my favorite bet that we have for underdog is going to be Amari Cooper to get over 49.5 for his receiving yards total. If that bet's still available, by all means, make it. Average sportsbook wise, we can get some good lines there as well. I don't think I really need to pull it up really regardless. I think I'd be betting the over. So obviously just take the best bet that you can there. Again, I just think he's due to have a good game as well as Deshaun Watson. And then let's see if we're getting any other good prop bets here. And I'm surprised we're not getting any Watson lines just yet. Kind of given the lines that we are getting right now, I could see betting Deshaun Watson get over 1.5 passing touchdowns, which people would find kind of ugly. I get it, but plus 170 on DraftKings, that's kind of intriguing in a game that's projected to be kind of a shootout. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay betting on that game line being correct. And if that's correct, Watson should be a decent part of that. Now, on the flip side of this game, guys, I don't really have any crazy takes, mostly just because I think Washington's kind of due to regress a little bit offensively, but also that Cleveland Browns defense has been, a little bit underperforming in terms of how people would have thought it would have went, including myself. And to me, it just seems like let's stay away from this game, that side of it. I think it's going to lead to being a little bit more unpredictable. All right, so jumping on into the next game, we got Denver versus Las Vegas here. Adams is kind of the big piece of news being out in this game. Again, Zamir White currently questionable. That doesn't really change much for me in general. Zamir White has been bad. As most of you guys know by now, I would assume. I was hyping up Madison as like a good best ball draft type play at end of your rounds, close it out with him. It kind of mentions Zamir White was probably the easiest fade that we had. Just given the fact that the talent between Zamir White and Alexander Madison, the gap was pretty much non-existent. And I think we are seeing that. Now, that being said, if Zamir White's out, I could see Amir Abdullah actually getting some work in a lot more work third down wise. It's probably still their most dynamic running back. So just an ugly situation there. For Denver, they've been very strange with their running back usage. They try to get Audric Estime going. He got injured. They try to get Batty going. He got injured. And so they've been forced to go back to Javonte Williams. And Javonte Williams ended up having a pretty good game last week. Now, Bo Nix ended up going back to the kind of Bo Nix that we all come to expect from him now, not looking very good last week. It'll be interesting to see which version of Bo Nix we get this week, because against Tampa, he was solid. Like, he was rushing the football and rushing the football well. I think that really kind of opened up the rest of the game for him and really the rest of the offense. Whereas last week against the Jets, a very formidable defense, a defense that's going to be tough to score against, he struggled. Clearly. And you could argue, man, he's had some tough matchups, right? Pittsburgh, the Jets, and now the Raiders are not even bad as well. They're not great, but he hasn't had an easy matchup yet. So that's part of the equation. I kind of feel bad for him. He's getting off to a rough start matchup-wise. But to me, the two players I'm looking at the most, probably Jacoby Myers, who just got targeted a bunch, 10 targets in that game against Cleveland. Really nothing in the first half, and then got going. If you guys remember last week, I was very much hyping up Trey Turner to have a big game. I was mentioning bet his over, I think it was 3.5 receptions. And I think Jacoby Myers did get to 4.5 receptions. Both two players I was really heavily encouraging you guys to bet on, and that worked out. We'll see if we'll do that again. And then Cortland Sutton for Denver, still getting targeted a bunch, really not leaving the field all too much. Better day should be ahead. This should be a better game for him, hopefully. So I don't mind Cortland Sutton as an option as well. Now, real quickly, we'll take a peek at the game total here. A very low scoring game, as we would expect. Denver's actually going to be favored by about 3 points in this game, but 36 is going to be the game total. That is really low, right? We got some very low scoring games this week. And guys, for the rest of the video, I'm going to shift more into just underdog. Because I'm doing this video on Thursday, there's not that many PrizePicks lines out there, especially the later on we get into the slate. So I'm going to switch over to underdog because they occasionally have more lines available at this time of the week, but I'm still going to be mentioning bets that I like as well, sportsbook wise as well. PrizePicks Underdog, they'll give us about the same lines. And so one of the bets that I think I really like on underdog would actually be betting Jacoby Myers to get over 4 receptions. Again, with Devontae Adams out, he is going to be the focal point. 10 targets last week, on the field a bunch. Like, I don't think we really have to worry about him not getting the targets or him not getting the usage. That should all be there. Actually, one of my favorite bets would probably be Jacoby Myers to get over 4.5 receptions at plus 115 on some sport books that are out there, because I think he's going to be that involved. Now, do I think he's going to have the potential to really crush that over? No, I think he'll be, a full game sweat there, but I think he will get to 5 receptions. So the fact that we're getting this at 4, even though the projection data is telling us maybe we don't have to make that bet, I think that that's a good line. I think he has a great chance to at least get 4 receptions, but I think he will get to 5 receptions. So to me, on underdog, that line's just a little bit too low. I think I'd be fine betting that over. And for what it's worth, guys, here were the snaps. Like, Jacoby Myers still played the same amount as we would expect, and Trey Turner still played a heavy amount as well. DJ Turner actually had a nice little end around there in that game. And so I did just want to see, are we getting any Trey Turner bets that we can be on potentially as well, like receptions wise? And as it sits right now, we don't. I would imagine the line would be at about 3.5 again. But while we're here, let's just I'll pull up Jacoby Myers. Yeah, guys, you can get Jacoby Myers at plus 120 on a lot of sites now. So these odds have actually gotten worse from when I made my notes for this, from when I did my preliminary research for the slate. So I'd be fine with that. Like, DraftKings, you can bet that over. I think it'd be fine with that. Sleeper, you get a better payout. So they do all their different discounts, the Sundays or whatever it is. I think it'd be fine including that, because the payout's going to be better. And again, I just think the targets are going to be there. So let's go ahead and jump on into the next game on the slate. It's going to be Arizona versus San Francisco. A very appealing game, a very fun game. Should be high scoring, but you never know. I do expect Brock Purdy to have a good game. I do expect Brock Purdy to be able to get 1.5 passing touchdowns. So that'll probably be a bet that we mentioned. In terms of news, Christian McCaffrey's still out. We know that. Receiver-wise, seem to be good to go. The biggest piece of news is with both tight ends. Probably two of the best fantasy tight ends right now, especially in terms of consistency. So if George Kittle is out, we kind of know what to expect, at least who's going to take over for tight end. It's going to be Eric Sobert, but I think it's just going to be a healthy dosage of Deebo Samuel, and actually Brandon Ayuk, I think, would be more involved. I do think we'll eventually see Juwan Jennings slip back more into the receiver number 3 role. But if Kittle is out, that does vastly benefit Deebo and Brandon Ayuk. And to that point, we're not getting any prop bets on them because of that. And then on the flip side as well, Trey McBride, the exact same thing. Now, he was a limited participant in practice, regardless. I think the expectation is going to be that he is going to play in this game. But if he does sit, that leads to Michael Wilson getting a lot more work. 7 targets last week, 9 targets the week prior to that. And then Greg Dortch as well. Greg Dortch, 4 targets, 4 receptions last week. And I honestly can't tell if these lines like reflect those players playing or not, because the offenses are still good regardless. 7 points is a big point difference, though, especially if George Kittle sits and Trey McBride does play. In a weird way, I do think that closes the gap a little bit. I'm surprised by the spread, but about a 50-point game total. Obviously, this is a game that we would be wanting to target a lot of over bets. Oh, okay. We are getting some prop bets here for the Niners, 90 reception prop bets, which I think I would want to be on more so. But Brandon Ayuk, 60 receiving yards, I would say that's probably correct. Damn. Same thing with Debo. Honestly, his line seems correct. 52.5. I'd probably favor the over there. Probably favor the over for both of them. Like, I don't mind the idea, again, of like stacking this game for their overs, but they all kind of seem to be correct. Now, one bet that I do like, and you probably don't need to bet on it, but it's going to be Brock Purdy, to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns. Kind of want to call this out because depending on when you guys are watching this video, his fantasy score line might be out as well. If he does get over 1.5 passing touchdowns, especially at this heavy likelihood, I would imagine that, if his fantasy score line's at like 16 and a half, I'd be fine betting the over there. It's kind of what I would put it as, probably 16. But we'll see. Like that's just something I want to call. That is something that goes into the fantasy score calculation, obviously. And in terms of where we are getting some like projected edges here, we are getting some for this game. So Brandon Ayuk, if you guys think Brandon Ayuk is due for a big game, a decent matchup here going against Arizona, George Kittle potentially out, that would obviously help him. Decent bet to bet his over receiving yards. You could actually do it on maybe ESPN bet, minus 125, but honestly, 1 yard difference. Do it on BetMGM. A little bit of a better edge there for you. From there, Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. ESPN bet for over his receiving yards. Again, this game has a little bit of a chance to be a shootout. The average line would be putting him about 53 for his receiving yards line. So on ESPN bet you can get at 49.5. Yeah, it's a decent edge there. Even though it's minus 135, it's still a good bet. But no receptions props just yet. Kind of annoying there. I will say one bet that I kind of like that the data is not going to like, Kyler Murray to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns. To me, this is very much dependent on if Trey McBride is active or not. Doesn't need to pass the concussion protocol, but that just gives you another red zone threat in this offense. And again, if it's going to be that high scoring, to me, it's very tough to imagine Kyler Murray not throwing for 2 passing touchdowns. Now, yes, James Conner can score multiple touchdowns. Maybe Kyler Murray rushes for one. I don't see that, and I do think this game's going to be closer. So I think, a good plus bet that you can make would be Kyler Murray at plus 135 to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns here on ESPN bet. Again, that's not going to be a good bet on PrizePicks or Underdog if it's made available because, the payout is not going to be adjusted. Like, this bet is available on PrizePicks right now, guys, as a demon, but the payout adjustment is not as good. So like if you do like that bet, you'd be better off doing it on like Flip or something. And then another fun game that we're going to get into is going to be the Green Bay Packers here versus the Rams. So both teams are very banged up. We know that. Cooper Kupp is out. Puka Nacua is out. You also have Demarcus Robinson citing an injury. I think we're expecting him to play. We're not too worried about that. Romeo Doubs also missing practice due to a personal reason. We will see. Like, you don't like that. They get more news on him. So if he sits, like Wicks is going to be someone that's going to be heavily targeted. Jaden Reed's obviously going to be more involved. I think we're expecting Dobbs to play, but if he sits, that just makes it more concentrated on Wicks and also Jaden Reed, also Tucker Kraft. But we do know that Christian Watson's not going to play this week, listed as doubtful. He could be back a little bit sooner than I thought, than really anyone thought when that injury occurred live, which is good for him. Mentally, I think that'd be very difficult for him to deal with because he has just had some unlucky injuries. Like, if you guys saw that play, just very unlucky, like nothing you can do about it. Any player in that situation would have it was just not good, right? But with him out, we did see the offense be a little bit more concentrated. We saw Tucker Kraft, who was someone that I mentioned, please be betting. I was begging people to bet him. I saw he was like a top waiver wire ad this week by a lot of fantasy football companies and touts, if you will. Hopefully you guys already had him on your rosters. We've been telling you guys since before the season to have him on your rosters. Best ball drafts, I was begging you guys to draft him. So hopefully you guys did that. He's been getting a healthy amount of snaps. Like literally since week 1, we have seen him get a bunch of snaps. That continued again last week, especially with Luke Musgrave causing an INT. I've mentioned how much I dislike Luke Musgrave a decent amount on this channel. I think a lot of the reason, literally, why people thought maybe Jordan Love wasn't that good of a quarterback at the start of the year last year was due to Luke Musgrave just not doing things correctly. Last week, Luke Musgrave, I would assume he ran the wrong route just due to the fact that Jordan Love was throwing the football to Romeo Doubs and Luke Musgrave ended up being in his throwing lane. And it's just one of those things that you've come to expect from Luke Musgrave, that when Jordan Love makes a mistake, it's actually probably on Luke Musgrave when he's involved in the play, which is indeed what happened here. Love admitted he was throwing the football to Doubs. So that's my long way of saying Tucker Kraft going to get a lot of playing time. I think he's someone we can be looking at again. And he's just good, guys. He does seem like someone that is a top 10 tight end in the league. I don't even hesitate to say that. Especially in terms of being a pass catcher, just looks the part. Just needs to have it all come together for a couple more weeks before we can really start to make that claim. And running back wise, I do want to call this out because watching the game, it did not seem like Josh Jacobs had 61% of the snaps. It actually seemed like it was much less than that. But no, he ended up playing, kind of the split that you would have expected, I guess, from him. I thought this would be closer to a 70-30 split. For whatever reason, Jacobs wasn't getting as much work as he really should have been. Maybe he's a little bit injured. Honestly, is the only thing I can come to with a conclusion, because Jacobs is clearly better than Wilson, Lloyd, when he was getting snaps. So it's just weird. Wilson's not bad. Wilson probably would be elite if he had speed, but he doesn't, so he's not. And I do want to call it the LA Rams snaps as well, because guys, this was super, super frustrating for me. 2 weeks ago, I was telling people Jordan Winton, this is the time. He's going to break out. He got 50% of the snaps. He was the player that was directly in when Cooper Kupp went out. Kind of expected that to actually occur after Puka Nacua got injured as well, that he'd be the swap. But in week 3, we saw him only get 38% of the snaps. It was very strange. Watching it back that week, I was like, he still looks the part. It seems like that was a tactical mistake by Sean McVay to not give him those snaps. And then last week happens. And in week 3, I was telling people, guys, bet is over. I think it was 3.5 receptions. Feel pretty good about that. Think he would have got it had he gotten the snaps. And sure enough, week 4 comes around and Sean McVay gives him basically every single snap. And he was in the Puka Nacua role, and he looked good doing it. Looked like Puka Nacua doing it as well, like we've been saying all preseason and now throughout the regular season. Now, for me, whenever we get stuff like that happening where it seems like the hype is clearly behind him, the coaching staff is clearly behind him, like talking him up and everything, it seems like it's probably just a trust thing, whether it be playbook or blocking assignments. There's something that was just missing. Don't know exactly what that is, but if we can lock him in to get in that workload, he's going to have another good game. 8 targets last week, 6 receptions, 62 receiving yards. Again, was used just like Puka Nacua, looked just like Puka Nacua. If the Packers' defensive secondary is banged up as well, like they were last week against Minnesota, it's only going to lead to Whittington being a decent option for us as well. Now, a thing that's been shocking to me in general for both these teams is kind of the lack of involvement for the running backs. Now, Kyren Williams did get more work last week as well. Again, 2 weeks ago, I was saying, I think it was 3.5, maybe 2.5 receptions for him. Regardless, I was like, I like his over receptions. We saw last year when Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp were out, Kyren Williams got a lot of work out of the backfield catching passes. I expect that to continue against the Packers. And then for what it's worth, Josh Jacobs, I would expect to get more targets as well. Last week, he did 6 targets, 4 receptions. Now, they were playing from behind, so that made more sense. But at the same time, again, you take out Christian Watson, who is a big part of this offense, guys. Christian Watson, people don't notice it. He opens up a lot in the offense. There are reasons why the Packers seem to struggle for a little bit when Watson goes out, because he is systematically one of the biggest pieces in their offense. Whether or not that comes to fruition for fantasy points, it's huge. So it'd be interesting to see how this Packers offense looks without him. I think they have learned to live without him, but this is a game that I think will be stacking. Let's take a peek at the game total. And yes, this is projected to be a high scoring game, 48.5 points. The Packers are favored to win by 3 points. I would argue that's probably a little bit too low, assuming Jordan Love's going to be fully good to go like he was in the second half of that game against Minnesota. Jordan Love looked good last week. So let's see if we're getting many prop bets for this game just yet. And yeah, the prop bets that we are getting right now are not the best in terms of what I typically like to target. I do see Josh Jacobs finally finding the end zone if this game is going to be that high scoring. He's had some close attempts. He's just due for touchdown. Receiving yards for Kobe Parkinson's not terrible, but not one I feel like I need to go in on. Jordan Winton, here we go. Are we getting some for him? I would love some reception props here, I think. Not receiving yards. But really, these 3, if I had to choose some where we could go for some overs, Whittington for over his receiving yards. Again, I think he's going to be involved. I'd rather do receptions. Jaden Reed should be a focal point of this offense, you would imagine. I'd probably rather do rush receiving yards for him because he does get some opportunities out of the backfield. Kyron Williams getting 17.5 receiving yards. Again, because we don't have the reception lines. Oh, we do. 3. There we go. Okay. Don't mind that. That's probably going to be a push, though. I'm kind of okay with that. I do think he'll get to 3 receptions. Jaden Reed, are we again? Okay. Jaden Reed's at 5 as well. Again, probably going to be a push, but chances are, again, given this potential high-scoring game, given this potential shootout, I think I'd be fine doing those, especially in a game stack. I think those two correlate pretty well. No Jordan Whittington lines, no Wicks lines, which it's kind of surprising that we're not getting Wicks lines. Not sure his role really changes whether or not Dobbs is active or not. Let's just talk over some of the lines that we are getting. So one of the few pure best edge bets that we have in terms of sports books for the main slate coming this Sunday is actually Kyron Williams to get over 2.5 receptions on FanDuel. FanDuel has the set at minus 146, so about a 59.4% likelihood, where it's not a big edge, guys. Don't get me wrong. It's only 0.2% edge. Like, that's not that much, but that just tells us that, especially when you agree with it like I do, it's a good bet. Like, there's a bet that we should be making because the average line would actually give it about a 59.6% edge. So this line right here, this average over and under, is taking a look at the average sportsbook lines without the juice in there. And so we compare it against a specific sportsbook with the juice, and we're getting a big edge like that. Whenever we get a plus edge like that, that is a good bet. That's a bet that we should be making. We are clearly getting an edge on FanDuel with that one. Bet that over. That's a good bet. It'll probably be adjusted. Don't get me wrong, but 2.5 receptions over Kyron Williams. That's a good bet. Jaden Reed, we know he's going to, we know this is a good bet. But minus 128 on FanDuel, yeah, give me that. Sign me up for that. I'm happy to do that. Tutu Atwell will get some design plays to get over 3.5 receptions. Don't exactly love that. Jordan Whittington here, 4.5 receptions. I would argue if he does get 4.5 receptions, he's going to get his over receiving yards as well. I'd say this is probably the correct line. Again, I think he's going to be heavily involved. Wish there was a few more design plays to him. That's my one concern, is that I think half of his receptions, 3 I can recall off the top of my head, were kind of third read plays, where, Matthew Stafford's going through his progressions and Whittington's just open. That's slightly concerning, whereas Tutu Atwell has been getting some design plays, some manufactured production. A little bit of a concern there, but I'd be betting that over. And then Tucker Kraft, this one's surprising to me. I just talked so much crap about, and Josh Jacobs for that matter, but I talked so much crap about Luke Musgrave and really hyping up Tucker Kraft. 3.5 receptions does not seem that much, especially if you tack on the fact that Dobbs could be out. That would also be huge. Need Luke Musgrave to not play that much. Matt LaFleur seems to like him for whatever reason, even though he keeps making these mistakes. And even though Tucker Kraft keeps looking better. Might be the draft capital bias, but plus 106 on BetOnline AG. Don't mind that for his over. That's one of the better bets that we have, I would say as well. Some other lines, guys, have Jordan Whittington at minus 150 to get over 4.5 receptions. And so kind of just by doing that, again, I think the over receiving yards is actually a decent one there as well. Just some good edges. Big game. I think it's more of a predictable game. We have some star players that are out, which leads to hopefully some edges for us, which is kind of the best spot, I would say. That's why I'm spending time. Also, Packers fan, so I feel like I'm a little bit more in tune to kind of what we should be expecting. And just for what it's worth, guys, I do not like to recommend these, typically speaking, but I don't mind the Jordan Love Demon prop bet over passing touchdowns. If he doesn't get that, then it will finally be probably Josh Jacobs finally getting that rushing touchdown. So I don't mind that. And we are starting to get some more lines in here, which is nice. All right, so we'll jump on into the last the last game for this video here. The New York Giants versus the Seattle Seahawks. So the interesting part about this game is that the Seahawks defense has been, solid enough. I know what you guys are saying last game, that didn't look the case. I get that. But for the most part, have been good enough. Kind of mentioned during the Monday night video that I could call Kenneth Walker the best running back in the league. I don't know if I was exactly there, but talent-wise, he's right up there with Breece Hall, with Bijan Robinson, in which people were trying to call him the best, those two, the best running backs in the league. He's right there with them talent-wise, guys. He just looks super good. I get why they limited his opportunities. They have a good backup running back that does deserve touches, and it's kind of a good thing for both of them as well because, well, you want them to stay healthy long term. Devin Singletary looked good last week, guys. The stats are not going to say it, but he had some very, very crucial runs, one that got called back, but some drive-saving rushes last week. Some people are going to forget that. They're going to see the stats and say he was terrible, but this is kind of the issue with the Giants, is that defenses are just going to keep everything in front of them for the most part. That's what they're going to try to do. Thus, it's going to be easier for them to shut down the run. That's really what they're trying to do. Daniel Jones, beat us, please, and beat us deep. And you won't be able to do that because Daniel Jones isn't the best deep ball thrower, but Daniel Jones has looked, dare I say, good. He has. Not great. Still someone you can probably move on from, but good. Good. Especially good in terms of getting the ball to Malik Neighbors. So many targets for him. And then Wendell Robinson as well. So many targets for him. Actually, between both of these teams, we could be seeing a lot of receptions here as well. So I'm actually curious. Let's jump right into the sports books. Let's see what the game says, the game lines. Yeah, not that low scoring of a game. 43.5. Seahawks are favored by 6.5 points. I would say that makes sense, but I want to see the lines that we're getting here. Any reception lines for this game that we can target? Yeah, so Tyler Lockett to go over 3.5 receptions. I'm a little bit surprised that we're getting this line. Again, on Monday night, I mentioned his likelihood to get 4 receptions was great, so this is a good bet. Jackson Smith and the Jigba, they have him at 5.5. I would say that line's correct. You would expect him to be able to get that over, but that's a correct line. DK Metcalf at 5.5. That's another correct line. The data is favoring the under pretty heavily there. Those are all the lines that we're getting here so far, so don't love that. And then just taking a peek at some of the lines that we are getting. Great Joseph to get over. I don't know, guys. Giants offense needs to score some touchdowns, right? You would think they'd be able to punch it in, but man, this should be a great bet. They need to figure that out. They need obviously to score touchdowns, right? I don't love that. DK Metcalf at 5 receptions. I actually am fine kind of betting that. Same thing with JSN at 5. Like these two have good chances to be pushes on underdog. Do we need to be targeting them? No, not exactly, but I think I'd be okay with it. Damn, I was hoping we'd be getting Tyler Lockett receptions here as well. So I'm going to be getting into the bets of the day for this video. Do just want to call out some of the bets that I like just for general sports books here, guys. So Mike Williams over 2.5 receptions. That's going to be one that I think I will be using for underdog and PrizePicks as well. Sam Darnold to get over 1.5 passing touchdowns on FanDuel is one that I like. Keenan Allen, never mind Keenan Allen. Joe Burrow over 1.5 passing touchdowns is one that I like on all books. PrizePicks is going to be where we're looking at that one the most. T. Higgins plus 115 to get over 4.5 receptions, like that one. Jacoby Myers to get over 4.5 receptions is another one that I like there. Tyler Lockett to get over 3.5 receptions is one that I like. So those are just some of them that I like. Obviously, all those Green Bay Packers and LA Rams prop bets that I like. Jordan Whittington over 4.5 receptions. Tucker Kraft over 3.5 receptions were the two that I like the most there. All right. Make sure to give a like and subscribe. Going to be getting into the bets of the day. And so for underdog, guys, I'm kind of doing a mixed bag of kind of the prop bets that I like, highlighting some of the sportsbook bets that I like that I just mentioned, as well as some of the bets I like on underdog. So Jordan Whittington and Tucker Kraft, those are two bets that I think are better bets on those sportsbook, as well as Jacoby Myers to get over 4.5 receptions on a sportsbook. I think that one has a good chance to be a push, but we're really not gaining an edge on underdog by using those bets here. Just want to make that clear. So if you guys are someone that can only play underdog or PrizePicks, maybe you could try this on Sleeper if you guys have access to that. We're going to get rewarded for a less likely bet. And then I like Zay Flowers for over 4.5 receptions. Matthew Stafford for over 0.5 receptions is actually one of the better bets as I finish recording this video. And then Mike Williams, I mentioned I like that for over 2.5 receptions. And then Amari Cooper for over his receiving yards. That got bumped by 1 throughout this video, but still not a bad bet for us. And then for me, for PrizePicks, kind of keeping it simple as it sits right now. Again, we're going to be getting more and more prop bets throughout the week. That'll be populating into the 9 to 5 PrizePicks and Underdog cheat sheets that are available on the website for just $10 a month. Link to get access to that is in the description below. But looking at Joe Burrow over 1.5 passing touchdowns, and then Mike Williams for over 2.5 receptions. Don't let me down, Mike Williams, please. All right, guys, that's going to do it.